They say holidays are about family. But what happens when family turns into strangers? Or worse, villains in the story you thought had a happy ending? My name is Margaret Holloway. I'm 68 years old, retired from a long, humble career as a high school English teacher, and a mother to one son, Daniel. A widow now, going on 12 years. Life's quieted down since my husband Henry passed, but I've made peace with solitude. I've grown fond of long walks with my terrier, Peaches, tending my modest garden, and rereading Jane Austen novels like the old friends they are. But family, that's where my heart still lives. Thanksgiving had always been my holiday. Every year, like clockwork, I'd begin planning in late September. I'd polish the good china, order the wine from our favorite Napa label, and call my son Daniel to ask which side dishes Kelsey, his wife, preferred this year. I wanted her to feel welcome, seen. It mattered to me. But this year was different. Started with a phone call. Not from Daniel but from Kelsey. Now let me tell you a bit about her. Kelsey Monroe Holloway is 32, strikingly beautiful in that way Instagram loves. Tall, sharp cheekbones. Those perfect latte-colored waves. She runs a wellness brand, does daily yoga, drinks green juice with bee pollen, and somehow always smells like lavender and aloofness. She married my son 5 years ago. I was thrilled at first. She seemed bright, ambitious. But time chipped away at the gloss. To her I was outdated. Not in a cruel way, but in that subtle, tight-lipped smile way. She didn't like the stories I told at dinner. Didn't like how I'd ask questions or offer unsolicited help in the kitchen. Over the years I began to feel invisible. Or worse, like clutter. So when her name flashed on my phone that Tuesday afternoon, I thought it might be a thank you for the catering deposit I'd sent in last week. Maybe she wanted to discuss the table settings or wine pairings. I answered with a cheerful, "Kelsey. Hi, sweetheart." There was a pause. That kind of pause that pricks the skin, sets your nerves to attention. "Hi, Margaret. I just wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving this year." "Oh. Yes, everything's confirmed. Rossi's is handling the catering again, same as last year. Daniel mentioned you loved their squash bisque." Yeah, about that." Another pause. My smile faltered. We were actually thinking we'd do something a little different this year. More intimate. A smaller thing. Just me, Daniel, and a few close friends. You know, more our vibe. I laughed, confused. "But honey, it's always just been the family. That's the tradition." She cleared her throat. "I know. It's just last year it was kind of stressful. The stories, the unsolicited advice. I think it sort of, killed the vibe." There it was. That word again. Vibe. Modern code for, you don't fit here anymore. I sat there on the edge of the sofa, one hand wrapped around a lukewarm mug of tea, trying to process what she just said. I opened my mouth, then closed it. She filled the silence. "We just feel like the energy would be better if we did it our way this time. No offense." No offense. The favorite phrase of people who've just kicked you in the stomach. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just nodded as if she could see me through the line. "Of course," I said softly. "Do what makes you happy." "Thanks for understanding," she replied, chipper now that the hard part was over. "Love you." She hung up. And just like that, I was uninvited from my own holiday. I stared at the phone for a long while. Peaches rested her head on my knee, sensing something was off. I gave her a slow scratch behind the ears. My mind spun in all directions. Did Daniel know? Had he agreed to this? Why hadn't he called? I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and opened the drawer where I kept receipts and notes. I found the folder marked Thanksgiving 2025 and pulled out the catering contract. I picked up the phone again. "Hi, yes, this is Margaret Holloway. I'd like to cancel my Thanksgiving order." "Yes, all of it. I understand the cancellation fee." I hung up, folded the contract neatly, and slid it back into the folder. Then I went to the study, opened my desk drawer, pulled out the envelope labeled Estate Plan Final Copy. It sat heavy in my hands. Kelsey never asked about it. Never wondered what I was leaving behind or to whom. She probably assumed everything would go to Daniel and through him to her. I took a deep breath. then opened the envelope. The attorney's number was still clipped to the front. I dialed it. "Hi, Barry. Yes, it's Margaret Holloway. I'd like to make some changes to my will." And just like that, the wheels turned. That night, I poured myself a glass of red wine, one of the good ones I'd ordered for the now-defunct dinner, and sat at the kitchen table with an old photo album. There, tucked between pages, was a picture from 10 years ago. Daniel standing on a dock, grinning with his arms around a smiling young woman in a yellow sundress. Her name was Emily, his college sweetheart, his first love, and mine too if I'm honest. Emily had been warm, funny, thoughtful. She helped me plant tulips in the front garden the spring of 2014. She sent me handwritten birthday cards even after she and Daniel split. Their breakup had been quiet, mutual. Life had tugged them in different directions, and Daniel met Kelsey 6 months later. But I always missed Emily. On a whim, and maybe with a little wine courage, I found her on Facebook. She was still single, living 2 towns over, now a veterinary nurse. I typed a message. "Hi, Emily. This is Daniel's mom, Margaret. I know it's been a while, but I hope you're well. I'm reaching out with a bit of an unusual invitation." I stared at it and hit send. The next morning she replied, "Hi, Margaret. Wow, it's so nice to hear from you. I'm actually free that weekend. What did you have in mind?" What did I have in mind? Reclaiming something, maybe. A Thanksgiving that felt like home again. The morning after I messaged Emily, I stood in the kitchen with a sense of giddy defiance I hadn't felt in years. Maybe decades. Like I'd stolen a bit of thunder from the gods. For once, I wasn't the one being sidelined, I was taking control. I clicked the kettle on, heart thumping as her reply buzzed in my inbox. "Of course I'd love to see you again. What are you planning?" That line danced in my mind as I stirred my tea. I told her the truth. That I'd been uninvited from Thanksgiving. That I was still hosting, just with a revised guest list. Emily's reply came minutes later. "Then count me in. I've missed you." I don't know why those 4 words cracked something open in me. Maybe it was the kindness. Maybe the memory of someone who never treated me like a burden, but as family. I blinked away tears and let them fall. No shame. No apology. Later that day I texted Daniel. Short. Civil. "Heard you'll be busy on Thanksgiving. No worries. I'll be doing something on my own this year. Hope you have a nice time." He didn't reply right away. But Kelsey did. "Glad we're all on the same page. Hope there's no hard feelings." Hard feelings? There was an entire harvest of them, Kelsey. But I wasn't about to hand her a bushel of my grief. Not anymore. That evening I sat at my dining table, a notepad in front of me, peaches curled at my feet. I drew a little square, my dining room, then scribbled a few names. Emily. Susan, my neighbor and old bridge partner, recently divorced and aching for something new. Paul and Rita from church, childless, sweethearts of the community. An old colleague, Mr. Bertram, recently widowed. Quiet, gentle, still wrote letters to his late wife in a journal. I looked at the names and thought, these are my people now. Not the ones I gave my best years to, only to be cast aside when I didn't fit the vibe. But those who see me. And one by one I called them. "Would you like to come to dinner?" I asked. They said yes. Every one of them. That Sunday I went to the grocery store, list in hand, and shopped like a woman on a mission. I picked out fresh rosemary, heirloom carrots, sweet potatoes that still had the scent of earth on their skins. No prepackaged trays. No shortcuts. I cook everything myself. As I passed the wine aisle I paused. Then smiled. I grabbed an extra bottle of Daniel's favorite, Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve. Petty? Maybe. But also symbolic. Let him taste what he gave up. Monday evening brought another surprise. Daniel finally called. I saw his name flash on the screen and stared at it for a long time before answering. "Hi, Mom." "Daniel." A pause. Kelsey's voice was faint in the background. I imagined her in their open-concept kitchen, lighting a eucalyptus candle, correcting his tone. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Kelsey said you were fine with the plan." I chuckled low and dry. I'm not broken, Daniel. I know how to cook a turkey without an audience. Another pause. I didn't mean for it to be like this. Didn't you? I asked gently. You knew I was planning everything. You knew I put down the deposit. You could have said something. He sighed. Kelsey thought it would be better, less pressure. Better for her, I said, and this time there was steel in my voice. What about what's better for me? He didn't answer. I imagined his face slack with guilt. I hated making him feel small, but I wouldn't let him shrink me anymore either. I just wanted peace, Daniel, I continued. But peace isn't the same as silence. And that's all I've had from you lately. His voice softened. I'm sorry, Mom. Really. I know you are, I whispered. But that doesn't change anything. I let the silence hang for a moment longer. Then, I'm hosting a few friends. Don't worry about me. Friends? He asked, surprised. Yes. People who actually want me at the table. More silence. Then cautiously. Is Emily going to be there? Ah, there it was. Yes, I said, proud of how clear and steady I sounded. She is. Another long pause. Then he cleared his throat. Well, that'll be interesting. I smiled faintly. Yes, it will. I hung up before he could ask any more questions. Thanksgiving morning came with golden light spilling over the frost-dusted yard. I woke early, slipped on Henry's old flannel shirt, the one I always wore on cold days, and put on some Sinatra. As the first notes of Fly Me to the Moon drifted through the house, I pulled the turkey from the fridge. I wasn't just making a meal. I was reclaiming something I had lost. Joy. Presence. Identity. The doorbell rang at 2:30 sharp. Emily stood there in a cozy cream sweater, holding a homemade pumpkin pie and a smile that lit up her entire face. You look the same, she said, stepping into my arms. You look better, I replied honestly. We talked in the kitchen while I basted the turkey. She told me about her rescue dog, her new apartment, her dream of opening a small animal clinic. Her eyes sparkled when she spoke. I realized how much I missed the sound of her. Not just her voice, but her kindness. Other guests arrived one by one. Susan brought cranberry compote and gossip. Paul and Rita brought wine and warm hugs. Mr. Bertram brought a photo of his wife and sat it near his plate without saying a word. I didn't ask questions. I just smiled and nodded. The table was full. Of food. Of stories. Of life. We laughed. We cried. We toasted to things lost and things found. And for once I didn't feel like I was watching my life from the corner of the room. I was living it. Later that night, as the fire crackled and the dishes sat piled in the sink, Emily and I sat on the couch sipping brandy. You know, she said, you've always felt like home to me. I looked at her. Really looked. Maybe that's what Thanksgiving is supposed to be, I whispered. Not just a tradition, but a return. She reached for my hand and held it. And in that moment I wasn't just a mother left behind. I was the heart of something again. I slept better that night than I had in years. When I woke the next morning, the house still smelled faintly of rosemary and cloves, and the fireplace was filled with soft gray ash, the remains of something beautiful that had burned gently through the evening. I padded into the kitchen barefoot, still in Henry's old shirt, and turned on the kettle. The silence wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. Content. By 10 o'clock, I'd washed the wine glasses, packed away the leftover pie, and placed a thank you note under Mr. Bertram's dish where he'd left his wife's photo. She would have loved your stories, I wrote in cursive, my hand steady, my heart full. I was sipping my tea when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. Emily? Really? Just that. No, how was your day? No, hope you enjoyed the holiday. Just the echo of his discomfort bouncing off a wall I no longer cared to hold up for him. I let the message sit. He sent another hours later. I guess I didn't realize she was still in the picture. This time I replied. She's not in the picture. She's someone who never tried to crop me out of it. He didn't reply. Not then. And I didn't chase after his silence anymore. Instead, I walked to the study, opened the desk drawer, and pulled out the estate folder again. Barry, my lawyer, had promised to send over the updated draft before the weekend. He'd asked gently, "Are you sure you want to do this, Margaret?" I'd said yes. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Because sometimes, love without reciprocity becomes weight, and we carry it so long we forget we can set it down. Saturday morning I hosted a brunch. Nothing fancy, just scones, eggs, and strong coffee. Emily arrived early to help set up. She brought her dog this time, a senior mutt with cloudy eyes and a slow gait. Peaches adored him immediately. We ate outside on the porch, wrapped in blankets, the sun warming our faces. Susan, always the chatterbox, leaned in. "You know, Margaret, that was the best Thanksgiving I've had in 20 years. Honest." Paul nodded. "You brought us together. You gave us belonging." That word stayed with me. Belonging. I hadn't felt like I belonged anywhere in a long time. Not in Daniel's life, not in the house Kelsey redesigned to look like a lifestyle catalog, not in the silence that followed every dinner where I wasn't the version of myself they approved of. But this table, these mismatched chairs and warm mugs and gentle smiles, here I belonged. After brunch, Emily stayed behind. We sat on the swing out back, the air crisp, the trees nearly bare now. She turned to me and asked softly, "Did it hurt? When he didn't fight for you to be there?" I didn't have to ask who he was. "Yes," I said. It felt like someone pressed the mute button on who I am. Like I'd been reduced to background noise. She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "My mom did that to me once," she said. "Uninvited me from my dad's birthday because she thought I'd bring the mood down. It's a special kind of heartbreak, isn't it? Being managed." That word. Managed. How often had I been managed to fit their narrative? Too talkative. Too nostalgic. Too emotional. Too much. But never too loved. Emily looked at me. "You've always made people feel welcome, Margaret. Maybe now it's your turn." She left a little while later, promising to visit again next weekend. As I watched her car disappear down the drive, a breeze caught the last leaves from the oak tree, sending them swirling into the golden light. Felt like something old leaving, and something new beginning. On Tuesday, the new estate draft arrived. I sat at the kitchen table with Barry on speakerphone as I reviewed the changes. Instead of a blanket inheritance to Daniel, I had divided things more thoughtfully. To Daniel, the trust Henry had set aside for education and healthcare. To Emily, a portion of the house and the full collection of Henry's books. He always said she was the only one who truly read. To Susan and Mr. Bertram, small bequests, tokens of friendship. To the local library, a generous donation in my name, enough to build a reading room and garden space. To Peaches, lifetime care arranged with a local vet clinic, Emily's workplace of course, in case anything ever happened to me. I stared at the paper long after Barry had hung up, not out of hesitation, but from the weight of it. The way it symbolized the first time I truly asked myself, who actually deserves what I've spent a lifetime building? It wasn't a punishment. It was a redirection. Thursday evening brought one more surprise. A knock on the door just after dinner. I opened it to find Daniel alone, holding a paper bag of leftover cranberry sauce. His eyes were tired, hands in his coat pockets. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He sat at the kitchen table, looking around as if the house had changed in the days since he'd last seen it. "Smells like rosemary," he said softly. "It always does this time of year," I replied. He nodded. I messed up. I didn't answer. He continued. "I let Kelsey speak for both of us. I didn't want to fight. But in avoiding the fight, I lost something more important." Still I said nothing. He looked up at me. "Emily said you cooked everything from scratch. That's how I remember it when I was a kid. You used to sit on the counter and steal spoonfuls of mashed potatoes," I said, the memory rushing back like warm wind. He smiled faintly. "I thought it made me a chef." We sat in silence for a while. Then he said, "Kelsey and I are going through something. She's not thrilled about Emily being around. Or the will. So she had found out." I shrugged. It's not about her. Or you really. It's about making sure what I leave behind goes to people who made me feel seen. He looked down. I want to make it right, he whispered. I know, I said. But wanting isn't the same as showing up. He nodded. We didn't solve everything that night. Life isn't a neat bow. But as he got up to leave, he kissed my cheek. And for the first time in a long while it felt real. That night I opened the windows before bed, letting the cold air rush in. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone on the outside looking in. I was the home. I was the fire. I was the table where everyone wanted to sit. And I would never again apologize for the space I took up. The following week, winter began to bite through the air. Frost clung to the window panes in the early morning, outlining every corner of my old Victorian house with lace. I used to dread this part of the year, when the holidays passed and the silence returned like an unwanted guest. But this year it didn't feel empty. Felt like exhale. Emily visited on Sunday with a bag of fresh pastries and a stack of dog sweaters she'd found on sale. Peaches strutted around the living room in a red turtleneck like he owned the place, and maybe he did. He had certainly earned his keep in loyalty and late-night cuddles. She noticed the envelope on the table, the estate packet. She didn't ask, just raised an eyebrow. It's finalized, I said. Signed and sealed. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't expect any of it. The books. The share of the house. I looked her in the eye. It's not about blood, Emily. It's about history. Memory. You're part of this home story. Her eyes glistened and she smiled through it. You always made me feel that way. Even when I was just the girlfriend. You were never just anything, I said firmly. Later, as she left, she hugged me tightly and whispered, You saved Thanksgiving for me, too. After she drove off, I sat by the fireplace and thought of all the people I'd quietly watched walk out of my life. My parents. My sister. Friends who moved away or grew too different. Henry. Now, in a strange way, Daniel. But I didn't feel abandoned anymore. For the first time, I felt chosen. That Wednesday, Kelsey called. I knew it was coming the moment I saw her name flash across my screen like a storm warning. I considered letting it ring out, a small form of protest. But no. I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to remember it. Margaret, she said. Not Mom. Never Mom. Just my name clipped and cold. Kelsey, I said. My voice calm. I stirred my tea with one hand, not missing a beat. So, she began, and I could hear the blade hidden behind the word. I understand you've made some changes to your estate. I smiled to myself. I have. Thanks for your concern. She let out a soft, practiced laugh. It's just surprising. Daniel is your only child. I assumed everything would naturally go to him. Oh, he's still taken care of, I said. Just not exclusively. You do understand how this looks? She said, her tone sharpening. Bringing Emily back into our lives, giving her part of the house, it feels vindictive. Vindictive would be suing you for emotional neglect, I said calmly. This is me redrawing the map. She fell silent for a moment. Then more carefully, look. I don't want bad blood between us. I just think you're letting your feelings cloud your judgment. Daniel and I. Kelsey, I interrupted gently. You uninvited me from Thanksgiving because I ruined the vibe. You made that choice. You don't get to be surprised when I make mine. There was a flicker of breath on the other end. You took back the catering? She asked suddenly. I did. And the inheritance changes were after that? Also yes. And you invited Emily, instead of us? She was never the one who tried to erase me. For the first time, Kelsey didn't have a response. No rebuttal. Just air. I imagined her sitting in her pristine, neutral-toned kitchen, realizing she no longer held the narrative in her perfectly manicured hands. You're not the villain in this story, Kelsey, I said. But you're not the hero either. And neither am I. I'm just a woman tired of being tolerated in rooms I built. She ended the call without saying goodbye. I stared at the phone, set it down, and exhaled. It didn't feel triumphant. Felt true. The next few weeks passed with surprising ease. Word of my Thanksgiving spread, not in a dramatic headline-grabbing way, but in quiet murmurs. Neighbors dropped by with cookies and cheerful comments. Heard you threw quite the dinner. I should have come to your place instead. You looked happy in the pictures Emily posted. Pictures? Yes. Emily had taken a few. One of me holding a tray of roasted squash, smiling like I hadn't in years. Another of everyone raising glasses at the table, Peaches in his little green bow tie at our feet. They weren't curated. They were honest. Daniel reached out again the first week of December. He asked if we could talk. In person. I agreed. He came alone, this time with no cranberry sauce, no distractions. He brought a single small photo album. The one I'd made when he graduated college, thick pages filled with Polaroids, ticket stubs, and notes in my handwriting. He sat on the couch, holding it in his lap like a confession. I found this while cleaning, he said. Didn't realize how much of me you held on to. I never stopped holding on, I said. I just stopped chasing after what kept slipping through my fingers. He opened to a page of him and Emily, young and bright-eyed, seated on the hood of his old Toyota. We were so good back then, he whispered. You weren't just good. You were home to each other. And then life happened. I think I let Kelsey rewrite too many parts of me, he said. And I let her rewrite you too. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was close. I reached over, placed a hand on his. You're not a villain, Daniel. You just forgot who taught you how to build a home. He leaned in, tears in his eyes, and we sat like that, two people who had drifted too far but never lost the rope between them. By the time Christmas came, my table was fuller than it had been in a decade. Emily, Daniel, Susan, Mr. Bertram, even Rita and Paul, who brought hand-knit scarves for everyone. Kelsey did not attend, and I didn't miss her. Instead, I watched my son carve the roast with careful hands, watched Emily pass him the serving platter with a soft smile, watched laughter fill the spaces that had once echoed with tension. As we raised our glasses, Daniel stood. I just want to say, he began, voice wavering, that this year taught me something. That sometimes we build lives that look right from the outside, but feel hollow when you're sitting in them alone. And I don't want that anymore. I want this. Everyone raised their glasses. And I, Margaret Holloway, widow, mother, forgotten and reclaimed, sat at the head of my table, surrounded by chosen family, and felt something bloom inside me. Not pride. Not revenge. Just peace. The kind that comes when you stop begging for a seat and start building your own table. New Year's came quietly. No grand fireworks. No crowded countdown. Just a slow evening with a warm casserole in the oven and the distant echo of laughter from a neighbor's yard. I sat by the fire, a blanket over my knees, Peaches curled against my thigh, the house filled with the smells of cinnamon and cedarwood. I hadn't made a list of resolutions. At my age, the promises I make are quieter. Do less apologizing. Spend time with people who make you laugh. Don't wait to use the good dishes. Emily called just after 10. I'm baking cornbread, she said. For no reason. Want some? She showed up 20 minutes later in slippers and a wool coat, holding a basket lined with a tea towel and warm bread nestled inside. We sat at the kitchen table like two teenagers sneaking a midnight snack. I used to be terrified of holidays, she admitted. Even before Daniel. They made me feel like I didn't have enough. Not enough family. Not enough sparkle. Not enough belonging. I looked at her, her face soft in the glow of the overhead light, and said, belonging doesn't come from blood. Comes from choice. And you are mine. She blinked fast, swallowed hard. You know that night at Thanksgiving when you hugged me at the door? I hadn't been hugged like that since my dad died. I reached over and took her hand, and there it was again. That thread between us. Strong. Unbreakable. Not by marriage. Not by tradition. But by truth. January passed like a snowflake, quiet and slow and fleeting. Daniel began visiting more. Once a week at first. Then twice. Sometimes with questions about the past. Sometimes with leftovers and a hopeful look. He and Kelsey were separated by February. I didn't celebrate that. Not out loud. But I did breathe easier. They hadn't been cruel to each other, just tired. Just different. Too many years trying to make a perfectly filtered life work for two imperfect humans. When it ended like a tired sigh, not a scream. I think I lost track of who I was supposed to be, Daniel said over tea one afternoon. And I'm not sure if I ever liked that version. You were never hard to love, I told him. You just forgot how easy it used to be. He looked down. Is it too late to start over with you? I reached across the table and touched his cheek, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead like I used to when he was 5. No, baby. It's never too late to come home. March brought crocuses to my garden, brave little bursts of purple in a world still stuck between seasons. I spent mornings outside again, hands in the soil, heart lighter. Emily helped me start a vegetable patch. Daniel came over with mulch and offered to build a small pergola. It became a rhythm. Coffee in the morning, gardening by midday, laughter in the evenings. A quiet, steady reclamation of what we lost. One night, I opened the old cedar chest in the attic and found the guest book from my and Henry's 30th wedding anniversary. Yellowed pages, smudged ink. His handwriting, curvy, looping, elegant, filled the margin of a page. This life is full because of you. Everything good leads back to your table. I ran my hand over the words. Not wept. Not mourned. Just remembered. That was what I had been fighting for this whole time. Not control. Not revenge. But that table. The one Henry believed in. The one I built, year by year, meal by meal, memory by memory. And I had almost let them take it from me. By late spring, the house buzzed again. Not with noise but life. Emily got a promotion at the clinic. Daniel moved into a small townhouse 10 minutes away. Susan and I started walking every morning at sunrise. Mr. Bertram came by on Sundays for roast chicken and chess, leaving with a jar of my strawberry preserves each time. One afternoon, I stood in the living room and looked around. Same furniture. Same paint. But everything felt different. Because I was different. I no longer felt like a placeholder in someone else's life. I was the main character in my own. Summer brought a call from the local library. The garden I donated to was nearly finished. They wanted to name it after me. I politely declined. Instead, I asked that it be called the Holloway Reading Garden for Henry. For both of us. They agreed. And invited me to speak at the opening in June. When the day came, I wore my mother's old brooch, polished my nails, and stood in front of a crowd of 20 or so people. Volunteers, librarians, families. Daniel stood at the back, hands in his pockets, proud. Emily stood beside him, holding a tray of lemonade for the kids. I looked out at them all and said, there was a time I thought legacy was what you left in your will. But I've learned it's what you build when no one's watching. It's the meals you cook. The stories you tell. The chairs you pull up for people who feel left behind. That's your legacy. That's your garden. And when I finished, they clapped, not out of obligation but out of love. Later, Daniel hugged me. You didn't just build a table, Mom, he said. You built a home for people who didn't even know they needed one. By fall, the leaves were back again. Gold. Fire red. Falling in clusters like applause. Thanksgiving approached. I got a text from Kelsey. I hope you're well. I heard about the garden. Congratulations. I didn't respond. Not out of anger. But because some doors need to stay closed. This year I made the invitations early. Wrote them by hand. Folded them into envelopes with pressed leaves from my yard. Emily. Daniel. Susan. Mr. Bertram. Rita and Paul. A young couple from the clinic who just moved to town and had no family nearby. Each note ended the same way. Come hungry. Come as you are. You always have a seat at my table. Thanksgiving Day 2026. The house was warm. Not just from the oven. From us. Laughter drifted through every room. Peaches barked at a balloon floating above the mantel. Someone put on a record. Sinatra again. Just like the first time I cooked my turkey alone. Emily brought sweet potato souffle. Daniel brought wine. Mr. Bertram brought a new photo, this time of him smiling, seated beside my garden. We held hands before the meal, and I looked around. This was my family. Some chosen, some earned back, some simply found. And as I lifted my glass, I thought of the journey, of what it took to get here. A woman cast out for ruining the vibe. A catering order canceled without fanfare. An inheritance redirected not to punish, but to reward the people who stayed. I wasn't bitter. I was full. Full of food, yes. But more importantly, of purpose. Legacy isn't something you leave behind. It's something you pass around the table. And mine? It was alive. It was loud. It was loved. And it was exactly where it belonged.